I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake, but I think it's a horrible thing. I think the whole war is a horrible thing. I think the war is, for that war to have started, is an abuse of power. This country would have never allowed that war to have started if I were president. That war is a shame. Millions of people are dead that should be alive. Cities are being destroyed all over Ukraine. The whole culture is gone. Or certainly very severely hurt. You know, the chapels, the churches, the spirals, all of the things that they had in Ukraine were among the most beautiful anywhere in the world. Most of them been knocked down and blown up into a million pieces. But most importantly, you have millions of people dead that shouldn't be dead. Think of it. Think of what a rigged election means. We would have had we wouldn't have had the war in Ukraine. We wouldn't have had the Russia-Ukraine situation. We wouldn't have had October 7th, Israel, the Middle East. We wouldn't have had inflation. We wouldn't have had the most embarrassing day or period in the history of our country. That's Afghanistan. One of the most embarrassing moments in the history of our country, Afghanistan. All of these things wouldn't have taken place. Think of it. We wouldn't have had inflation. But millions of people would be alive, except for the fact that the election were rigged, because that war would.
It is still shocking how quickly and in how many ways Donald Trump has turned his back on our allies. Whether it's calls to make Canada a 51st state, tariffs on our trading partners, or, of course, the image that is still stuck in our minds of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance berating President Zelensky in the Oval Office. And clearly, President Zelensky has not forgotten about that day. And of course he wouldn't, because Donald Trump, since then, has done everything he possibly can to support Vladimir Putin, both publicly and privately. It is the reason why President Zelensky, when asked about his relationship with the U.S., gave an answer that was shocking, but in many ways also wasn't. That triggered Donald Trump into an absolute meltdown. We are going to get into it, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we can get into what President Zelensky recently said in a 60 Minutes interview, I want to hear Donald Trump's response to a devastating and disgraceful bombing campaign launched by the Russians just hours ago.
Also, yes.
Do you have a reaction to Russia's Palm Sunday attack on Ukraine?
I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake, but I think it's a horrible thing. I think the whole war is a horrible thing. I think the war is, for that war to have started, is an abuse of power. This country would have never allowed that war to have started if I were president. That war is a shame. Millions of people are dead that should be alive. Cities are being destroyed all over Ukraine. The whole culture is gone. Or certainly very severely hurt. You know, the chapels, the churches, the spirals, all of the things that they had in Ukraine were among the most beautiful anywhere in the world. Most of them been knocked down and blown up into a million pieces. But most importantly, you have millions of people dead that shouldn't be dead. Think of it. Think of what a rigged election means. We would have had we wouldn't have had the war in Ukraine. We wouldn't have had the Russia-Ukraine situation. We wouldn't have had October 7th, Israel, the Middle East. We wouldn't have had inflation. We wouldn't have had the most embarrassing day or period in the history of our country. That's Afghanistan. One of the most embarrassing moments in the history of our country, Afghanistan. All of these things wouldn't have taken place. Think of it. We wouldn't have had inflation. But millions of people would be alive, except for the fact that the election were rigged, because that war would have never started, and Putin never would have started that war. Okay, any other questions?
When you say they made a mistake in the attack, you said they made you were told they made a mistake. Do you mean it was unintentional?
They made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them. This is Biden's war. This is not my war. I've been here for a very short period of time. This is a war that was under Biden. He gave him billions and billions of dollars. He should have never allowed, if he had any brain, which he didn't have and doesn't have, and now it's being proven, he wouldn't have allowed that war to start. I would have absolutely not. That war would never have taken place. But remember this is Biden's war. I'm just trying to get it stopped so that we can save a lot of lives. They happen to be Ukrainian and Russian lives. But all I want to do is get it stopped.
Witkoff, sir, did you meet with Mr. Witkoff today?
A mistake. Donald Trump calls a targeted campaign by Vladimir Putin, breaking with an agreement that we knew he would never actually abide by. A mistake. How much more water can this guy carry for Vladimir Putin? How many more excuses can Donald Trump offer up? How much more can Donald Trump turn his back on our ally because some dictator batted his eyelashes at him? It is just a sad example of what a pathetic, insecure man Donald Trump is, that Vladimir Putin has such a hold over him. But at this point, we should not be surprised, because President Zelensky isn't. And he made that really clear in his 60 Minutes interview when he said this. Does the United States have your back? Scott Pelley asked President Zelensky. Pausing, he said, even in this pause of mind, there's a problem, because I want to answer truthfully and quickly that the United States is our strategic, strong partner. But the pause is doubt. I don't doubt that the people of America are with us. But in a long war, many details are forgotten. In Europe, everyone fears that the United States may drift away from Europe. Scott Pelley continued asking, can you do without the United States? With Zelensky answering, I think without the United States, we will suffer great losses, human and territorial. So I wouldn't like to consider that. But this is our destiny, our land, our life. One way or another, we will end this war. So, much like all of us at home, President Zelensky and the rest of Europe have no confidence in Donald Trump, because why should we? This is a man who is completely self-involved and does not care about the outcome of this war for our ally. He cares about the outcome of this war for the dictator that he loves. And it's the reason he freaked out and attacked not only President Zelensky, but President Biden, for some reason, after this interview. The war between Russia and Ukraine is Biden's war, not mine. I just got here, and for 4 years during my term had no problem in preventing it from happening. President Putin and everyone else respected your president. I had nothing to do with this war. But I'm working diligently to get the death and destruction to stop. If the 2020 presidential election was not rigged, and it was, in so many ways, that horrible war would have never happened. President Zelensky and crooked Joe Biden did an absolutely horrible job in allowing this travesty to begin. There were so many ways of preventing it from ever starting. That is the past. Now we have to get it to stop, and fast. So sad. Donald Trump continues to refuse to call Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine an invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin. Somehow, this is President Zelensky's fault. He allowed this to happen. And this just reminds me of the perfect clip for a call out of this nonsensical talking point. That was from Jasmine Crockett, who slammed MAGA for their defense of Putin, their capitulation at Trump, and a takedown right here.
And we say that we take that oath seriously, but when it comes into actually doing something that looks like preserving that oath or looks like preserving the Constitution, we get a little wobbly, and I'm not really understanding what's going on. Freedom of press doesn't look like kicking out the Washington Post, or actually the Huffington Post has been kicked out. We know that the Associated Press has been kicked out, and now the Washington Post is not going to allow for op-eds in any way if for some reason they criticize the sitting president of the United States. What this is starting to feel like is a smaller version of Russia. And I am trying to tell you that we are nothing like Russia. We are not supposed to be like Russia, but that is what we've got going on. And I'm sorry, I know that some of my colleagues still struggle with answering the question of who won the election in 2020. And you may have felt a way when you had social media checking people and saying, no, Trump did not win the election in 2020. That is absolutely factual. And unfortunately, because some people got all riled up because they believed the lies, they ended up getting locked up because they decided that they were going to believe the lies. They ended up at the Capitol on January 6th, and they were trying to tear this thing apart because they felt like their country was falling apart in front of their eyes because for whatever reason, there were people in power that were peddling a lie about the election. We also know, and some of y'all may still say that COVID was a hoax. COVID wasn't a hoax. Tell that to the over 1 million people that died under Donald Trump's first watch. It wasn't a hoax. So no, I do believe that it was okay. In fact, I do believe that it was ethically right for social media to check people, because you had people that didn't know anything about science and decided that they were going to put out whatever lies or propaganda or conspiracy theories they wanted to, and people died. At some point in time, we have to evaluate what is factual. And I know that facts hurt y'all, and I just wish we could get on the same page, but we do know during the presidential election that the president would not go and participate in anything if fact-checking was going to be a part of it, because he didn't want to be fact-checked. We know that the vice president got upset in his vice presidential debate when he was fact-checked. It used to be a time in this country that we as members of Congress or elected officials thought that it was okay to just tell the truth. Instead, we're pushing conspiracy theories, and some of them are killing people. It's the same thing that we have coming out of Doge. It's the reason that people are dying. It's the reason that farmers are losing their farms, because we continue to peddle conspiracy theories. It is time for us to say, Mr. President, guess what? Russia invaded Ukraine. Can we at least agree on that one? Facts matter. Y'all, this is literally potentially putting us into an international crisis. We may be heading towards the next world war because we have a president that wants to pal around with Putin and wants to do everything to make him feel good, including lying about who invaded who. Mr. Chair, I got a minute left, but I really want to yield to any of my colleagues and ask them if they will say today, very basically, that when it came down to the war in Ukraine, that it was not Ukraine that invaded Russia, it was the other way around. Is there anybody in here that has enough courage to say that Russia invaded Ukraine?
You can have my time.
And this is yet the problem. This is the problem. That is not infringing upon free speech.
Will the gentlelady yield?
I will yield to the right.
Thank you, Ms. Crockett. To be clear, your challenge, I think, was across the aisle, because I think every member on your side of the aisle agrees with the obvious fact that Vladimir Putin ordered the filthy, bloody, imperialistic invasion of Ukraine. And in fact, at the time, Donald Trump as president never denied it. In fact, he praised it. He said it was, quote, an act of genius when Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine. So I would hope some of our colleagues would consent to at least that historical point, since we think history is so important. There are people who want to relive that in our oversight report.
And unfortunately, he decided that he wanted to talk about his clothes. Now, maybe this is because Trump never wanted to go serve his country, and right now the only service that he's giving to us is driving our country apart. But I'm sorry, when you're at war, you're not worried about your outfit. That is what we call a privilege, number one. Number two, to say, oh, what can you afford? Well, if he was walking around in the fanciest suits, I'm sure that they would accuse him of taking our dollars and spending it on his wardrobe and being more concerned about that. Listen, this is a no-win situation when you're walking in with someone who has decided that he is going to align himself with a dictating thug.
We have a bunch of cowards in the Republican Congress. In Congress, and we also have one in the White House, very clearly. And I'm so glad that Jasmine Crockett used that opportunity not just to call him out, but to have that silence really loudly sit there, as MAGA was so terrified. They had no bravery like the men and women fighting in Ukraine, no bravery like President Zelensky, just sat in silence. Pretty obvious that they are on the wrong side of history here. So, we're going to keep calling them out on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you.